إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد والفرقان الحميد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا كان يوم صوم أحدكم فلا يرفث ولا يجهل فإن امرؤ شاتمه أو قاتله فليقل إني صائم إني صائم. Dear brothers in Islam, scholars have divided fasting into two categories. Or they said fasting is of two types. One is a siyam al-haqiqi, one is real fasting, and the other type of fasting is siyam al-suri, meaning a fasting that looks like it's fasting. In reality, it is not a proper fasting. And obviously, the siyam al-haqiqi, the real fasting, is the fasting that will be, meaning that will be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the person should hope that he will be rewarded for the fasting. Real fasting is the actual fasting, which will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the person will be rewarding for the fasting. All the blessings of fadail of the fasting are only achieved if you are going to fast in an appropriate way, if our fasting is going to be real fasting, not like a siyam suri, as scholars have said, something that looks like fasting, but it is not a real fasting. And now the question arises is, what is the real fasting? What is the proper fasting? Where we get the reward of the fasting and we accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is going to bless us with all the blessings of fasting. The real fasting, as scholars have rightly said, is the fasting where you stay away from eating and drinking and your desires, and at the same time you stay away from acts of disobedience, meaning you control your stomach, you control your private parts, and at the same time you control your tongue and other limbs as well. You restrain from sinning, or you restrain yourself from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So fasting is not just giving up food and drink and staying away from lust and desires from the dawn till dusk. Rather, it is meaning you have to refrain from those things, but at the same time you have to control your other limbs, your tongue, and you have to stay away from the acts that displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this regard, especially the tongue, we need to take control of our tongue while we are fasting. Not to say something that displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or not to get engaged in any type of talk that earns us the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned especially controlling the tongue and other limbs as well in a number of hadiths. Let me mention a few hadiths in this regard and then try to understand what Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said in these hadiths. There is a famous hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim in which Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ صَوْمِ أَحَدِكُمْ, when one of you is fasting, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَجْهَلْ, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَجْهَلْ, meaning he should not get engaged in evil acts, immoral acts, وَلَا يَجْهَلْ, and neither he should behave in an ignorant way. وَلَا يَجْهَلْ, means should not do anything that is improper. فَإِنِ امْرُؤٌ شَاتَمَهُ. If a person tries to involve him, provokes him, or if a person abuses him and provokes him, he should restrain himself. He should not behave or not retaliate in the same way. Rather, he should say, Inni Saim, Inni Saim. I'm fasting. I'm a person who's observing fasting. Meaning, I cannot behave the way that you are behaving. I cannot answer you in the same way because I'm a fasting person. What it means that a person should say, Inni Saim, Inni Saim. Scholars have mentioned two meanings. One of the explanation is given that you should say to the person that, look, I can't behave in the way that you are behaving because I'm a fasting person. Scholars have said that especially in Ramadan, month of Ramadan, everyone is expected to fast, or everyone is required to fast. If the conditions of fasting are meeting, then he should say to him clearly that I'm fasting, it is month of Ramadan, I cannot behave in the same way. And if it is a voluntary fast, then you should say to yourself, you should remind yourself that you are fasting and you have to refrain from things, acts of disobedience, and you have to behave in an appropriate way. And there's another hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim in which Prophet ﷺ said, As-siyamu junnatun, meaning fasting is a shield. Fasting is a shield. And scholars have again explained this part, fasting is a shield, in two ways. They say it is a shield against the punishment of Allah. As-sawma hisnun hasinun min an-nar, as Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith. Meaning it will protect you from the hellfire, against the hellfire. And another meaning of fasting being shield is that it should protect the person from the acts of disobedience, sinning. As Prophet ﷺ said in a famous hadith, Ya mashar al-shabab, O youngsters, whoever among you are forced to get married, let him go ahead and get married. Because Prophet ﷺ says, فَإِنُّ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ وَأَحْسَنُ الْفَرْجِ. Marriage will protect the private parts and help the person lower his gaze. And the one who is physically able to get married, but financially he cannot do so, then Prophet ﷺ said, فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاءٌ. He should fast because fasting is a wajah, meaning is a shield. It helps him control himself, control his lust and desire, and control his limbs. So that's what Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, وَالصِّيَامُ جُنَّةٌ, fasting is a shield. إِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ صَوْمِ أَحَدِكُمْ فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَسْخَبْ. When one of you are fasting, let him not get involved in the immoral acts. وَلَا يَسْخَبْ, neither he should scream or shout. Meaning he should restrain or take control of his tongue. And by the way, tongue is very important or very vital organ. Even though it is very small, but it is very powerful in terms of its impact. And the famous hadith comes to my mind in which Prophet ﷺ said, and it is authentic hadith of Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, that a person utters a kalima, meaning says few words, which are so pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that on account of that one statement, he will be taken to the paradise. He will be taken to the Jannah. On the other hand, وَإِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ لَا يَتَبَيَّنُ مَا فِيهَا. And on the other hand, a person just utter few words. Kalima means few words, one word or one sentence or so on and so forth. So displeasing and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will be taken to the depth of the hellfire because of that one statement that he makes. So Prophet ﷺ said, when one of you is fasting, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَسْخَبْ فَإِنْ سَابَّهُ أَحَدٌ. If someone is abusing him or provoking him or treating him in a wrong way, he should not retaliate or he should not behave in the same way. Rather, he should say, Inni Saim, Inni Saim. He should protect his fasting. He should protect his tongue. He should protect his limbs. He should say that, look, I'm a fasting person. I cannot go, meaning I cannot go to the level. By the way, this is not to say that you take control of your tongue or you take control of your limbs and protect them from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only during the fasting. Obviously, these things are haram at any time. These things are haram. Misuse of the tongue and sinning or disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with other limbs are haram all the time. But they become even more so while you're fasting. They become more haram while you're fasting because you're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning from the time you have make your intention or the Fajr time starts, you are mutalabbisun bil ibadah, meaning you are engaged in an act of worship until you break the fast. So it doesn't make sense that if you are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the same time you are disobeying Him through other actions. You're disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through your tongue or through your other limbs. And remember, when we start our prayer, the first thing that we start our prayer is by saying Allahu Akbar, which is called Takbir Tahrima. Takbir Tahrima means the takbir which makes ordinary things haram. You cannot speak anymore. You cannot eat. You cannot look around. Many ordinary things, normal things becomes haram once you start the prayer. In the same way, when you start the Hajj and you get into the state of Ihram, they are mahzuratul ihram. Many normal things or ordinary things becomes haram. Why? Because now you're in a state of ibadah and you have started your umrah, you have started your hajj. Until you finish them, all those mahzuratul ihram remains haram. In the same way, when you have started your fasting from the fajr, until you break the fast, you're going through an ibadah, meaning you are engaged in a ibadah, and it is not appropriate that you're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one way, at the same time you're involved in the acts of sins and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through other actions. Because that will, if it not invalidate your fast, it will reduce the reward and the person will be deprived from the reward of fasting. And that's why the famous saying of Hafsa radiallahu anha, if I'm not wrong, or either Hafsa radiallahu anha, Hafsa bint Sirin, one of them, she said, Ya habbada ibadah, meaning how good ibadah is fasting is. I am sleeping on meaning I'm sleeping on my bed and I'm still getting a reward for my ibadah, meaning my ibadah is continuous. So the ibadah of fasting continues from the time of, once the time starts, the Fajr time starts, and you are in a state of ibadah until you break your fast. So even if you are sleeping, let's say after Zuhr, taking qaylula or so, still you will be regarded as you are mutalabbis, you are engaged in the ibadah, and you will be rewarded. There is another famous saying of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is in Sahih Bukhari, "Man lam yada qawl az-zuri wal amala bihi, falaysa lillahi haja fi an yada ta'amahu wa sharaba." Meaning, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that "Man lam yada qawl az-zuri wal amala bihi," the one who does not leaves off or does not give up qawl az-zur. Qawl az-zur means the idle speech. Qawl az-zur, the misuse of the tongue. Wal amala bihi, and acting upon falsehood. If a person does not give up these things, فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ فِي أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of the person to give up his food and drink. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no interest in the fasting of this person. What it means, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need or no interest, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to accept the fasting of this person, and He's not going to reward. He's not going to reward, and He's not going to accept his fasting. So this is something really important. While we are fasting, it's not just only, as I mentioned earlier, to give up your food and drink and lust and desire and protect your batan and farj from those things. Rather, our tongue should fast, our other limbs should observe fasting, and we should refrain from acts that displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another hadith, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Rubba sa'imin laysa lahu min siyamihi illa al-ju." Meaning, many people who will be fasting, what they get from their fast, laysa lahu min siyamihi illa al-ju. They are experiencing hunger. They are keeping themselves hungry and thirsty. That's it. What they are getting from their fast, nothing except for thirst and hunger. And who these people are, who are just refraining from eating and drinking and refraining from lust and desire, but not controlling their tongue and not controlling their other limbs and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through other actions. Okay, so these are the few hadiths, and let's see what scholars have said or Sahaba have said in this regard. And then we'll take some sayings of Tabi'in and some sayings of Salaf in this regard. Aqwalu Sahaba. عن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال ليس الصيام من الشراب والطعام وحده ولكنه من الكذب والباطل واللغو. Umar ibn al-Khattab رضي الله عنه, the second best companion, the second Khalifa, he said ليس الصيام من الشراب والطعام. Fasting is not just giving up the food and drink. ليس الصيام من الشراب والطعام وحده ولكنه من الكذب. Meaning, during the fasting you have to refrain from lying, والباطل and falsehood, وَاللَّغْوَ, and idle talk or useless talk. Meaning useless talk can mean something that is not beneficial. Even though it can be mubah, it can be allowed, it can be normal talk, but it is good to avoid. So he says fast is not all about giving up your food and drink. Rather, you have to stay away from lying, and you have to stay away from batil and law. And something similar, وَأَنَا حَفْصِ ibn Ghiyas عن الشعبي and Ali ibn Abi Talib مثله. Something similar has been reported from Ali ibn Abi Talib, رضي الله عنه, the fourth Khalifa. قال جابر, another companion, Jabir رضي الله عنه, Jabir ibn Abdullah, he says, إذا سمت فليسم سمعك وبصرك. When you're fasting, let your hearing fast, and let your eyes also fast. وَلِسَانُكَ, let your tongue also fast from lying and acts of disobedience. وَدَعَ أَذَى الْجَارِ, meaning all these limbs also should get involved in the fasting. So it is not just fasting of the stomach and fasting of the private part. All the limbs should also observe the fast. And he says, وَلْيَكُنْ عَلَيْكَ وَقَارٌ وَدَعَ أَذَى الْجَارِ. While you are fasting, don't bring or don't try to harm your neighbor. Again, it is not to say that you refrain from these things while you are fasting only, and they won't become halal after you have completed your fast or after Ramadan. These things are haram and they remain haram. These things are haram at any time and they remain haram. What we are trying to say that because in the month of Ramadan, the blessed month, and because during the fasting you are engaged in an act of worship, they become even more haram so, and you have to make sure that you are refraining from these things. وَلْيَكُنْ عَلَيْكَ وَقَارٌ وَسَكِينَةٌ يَوْمَ صِيَامِكَ. When you are fasting, there should be a tranquility. Your behavior should be, meaning your body language and your behavior should be absolutely different. A person looking to you should realize that you are fasting, you are in a state of fasting. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَوْمَ فِطْرِكَ وَيَوْمَ صَوْمِكَ سَوَاءً. The day you are fasting and the day you're not fasting should not be same. You shouldn't behave in the same way. You shouldn't behave in the same way. And Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu, another companion, he said, إِذَا سُمْتَ فَتَحَفَّظْ مَسْتَطَعْتَ. Meaning when you're fasting, protect your limbs as much as you can. Meaning protect them from sinning and performing any acts of disobedience. And Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu قال إذا اغتاب الصائم أفطر. He says if a fasting person backbites, فقد أفطر, he has invalidated his fast. Very strong statement. He didn't say that he lose the reward of the fasting. He's saying إذا اغتاب الصائم أفطر, meaning he has broken the fast. His fast is gone. قال عائشة رضي الله عنها الغيبة تضر بالصيام. Aisha radiallahu anha said, al-ghibatu tadurru bisiyam, meaning backbiting will damage the fasting. Tadurru will harm the fasting. It can be understood that it will invalidate the fasting, or it can be understood that the person will lose the reward of fasting. And كان أبو هريرة وأصحابه إذا صاموا جلسوا في المسجد. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu and many other companions and his students, while they were fasting, they will stay in the mosque. إِذَا سَامُوا جَلَسُوا فِي الْمَسْجِدِ, meaning they will stay in the mosque. Because if you're in the mosque, obviously you're not going to get engaged, in any acts of disobedience, or you're not going to lie, or you're not going to misuse your tongue or other limbs. Meaning majority of the time while they are fasting, they would spend in the mosque. And كانوا يطهرون الصيام وقالوا نطهر صيامنا. And they would say, why we are staying in the mosque during the fast, or spending majority of the time, نطهر صيامنا, meaning we are protecting our fasting. We are safeguarding our fasting, we are protecting our fasting. So this is some saying of, meaning some of the sayings of the companions. Let's see what some of the tabi'in have said. قال المهلب, one of the famous tabi'in, he said, فيه دليل أن حكم الصيام الإمساك عن الرفث وقول الزور. Meaning, commenting of those hadiths that I mentioned earlier, he's saying, إن حكم الصيام وحكم الصيام الإمساك عن الرفث وقول الزور. Meaning the wisdom behind the fasting is to train us, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is training us from rafath wa qawli zur, from acts of disobedience, and wa qawli zur, and from the idle speech. And that is the whole purpose of fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said fasting has been made obligatory upon you. It was obligatory upon the nations before you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Why fasting has been made obligatory? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so you can achieve taqwa. That is the purpose of the fasting. That is the meaning of fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not get anything from us staying hungry and thirsty. And what we get from staying hungry and thirsty, if we're not observing the other etiquettes of fasting and not staying away from acts of disobedience, we don't get anything other than hunger and thirst. So that's what he said in Hikam al-Siyami or Hukm al-Siyami, al-imsak ani rafati wa qawli zur, kama yumsik ani ta'am wa sharab. He says the same way that you stay away from eating and drinking, you need to stay away from acts of disobedience, especially the related with your tongue. وَإِن لَمْ يُمْسِكَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ تَنَقَّصَ صِيَامُهُ. If you're not staying away, if you're not refraining from acts of disobedience, especially those that are committed through your tongue, تَنَقَّصَ صِيَامُهُ, yes, your fasting is incomplete. وَتَعَرَّضَ لِسَخَطِ رَبِّهِ وَتَرْكِ قُبُولِ مِنْهُ, meaning you are likely to earn the anger of Allah. Meaning the whole purpose of fasting is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get the reward. But if you are not taking control of your tongue and the other limbs, what will happen? You will lose the reward of fasting, and nose billah, you will earn the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَرْكِ قُبُورِ مِنْهُ, and He may turn away from you and not accept your fasting. And Hafsa bint Sirin, another tabi, lady tabi, Hafsa bint Sirin, she is the sister of Muhammad ibn Sirin, the famous Imam. She said, الصيام جنة ما لم يخرقها صاحبها وخرقها الغيبة. The fasting is a shield. It will protect you against the punishment of Allah, and الصيام جنة, the other meaning as well, meaning it is a shield against the acts of disobedience. ما لم يخرقها, and it will remain so until you break your fast. And how you break your fast? He said al-ghiba. So she is regarding that breaking fast or fast gets invalidated if you are backbiting. عن إبراهيم النخعي قال كانوا يقولون الكذب يفتر الصائم أو يفتر الصائم. Ibrahim al-Nakhi, another tabi, he says كان يقولون, meaning people are saying, or it is known that scholars say الكذب يفتر الصيام, lying invalidates the fast. The same way that eating and drinking deliberately or eating and drinking on purpose will break your fast, in the same way he said that scholars say that الكذب يفتر الصيام. ومن التابعين منصور مجاهد قال ما أصاب الصائم الشون إلا الغيبة والكذب. Again, another saying of Mujahid, the students of Abdullah ibn Abbas, the Mufassir of the Quran, he says ما أصاب الصائم الشون إلا الغيبة والكذب, meaning if you're not refraining from ghiba and from lying, the fast is gone, or you will lose the reward of the fasting. Okay, these are the few sayings of the Tabi'in. Let's see what scholars have said, the Salaf. قال الأوزاعي, Awza'i is the Imam of the Dimashq and passed away 157 Hijri. He said, إِنَّ الْغِيبَةَ تُفْتِرُ الصَّائِمَ وَتُوجِبُ عَلَيْهِ قَضَاءَ ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ. See the powerful statement. He says, ghiba invalidates the fasting. The backbiting invalidates the fasting. And obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, backbiting is like you're eating the flesh of your dead brother. In Surah Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَنْ يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. So Awza'i said, إِنَّ الْغِيبَةَ تُفْتِرُ الصَّائِمِ. Ghiba invalidates the fast, and he has to make qaza of the day. وَعَلَيْهِ قَضَى ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ. And in this regard, the most strict scholar was Allama ibn Hazm, the famous scholar, Allama ibn Hazm. In his famous book, Al-Muhalla bil-Athar, he said, وَيُفْتُرُ الصَّوْمَ أَيْضًا تَعَمُّدُ كُلُّ مَعْصِيَةٍ. He says in Muhalla ibn Athar, Al-Muhalla bil-Athar, the famous book that he has compiled, he says that every act of disobedience is not only lying and backbiting, any act of disobedience that have been committed deliberately, he says, يُبْتُلُ الصَّوْمِ, it will invalidate the fast. And he equates them with eating and drinking those. He says, as fast is broken by eating and drinking and by sexual acts or so, in the same way, fast is broken and fast gets invalidated if you are involved in any act of disobedience. Deliberately you are disobeying, you're sinning. And he is very strong, and he is very strong in presenting his argument. The same way we find Allama ibn al-Qayyim. The same way we find Allama ibn al-Qayyim, another great scholar, he's very powerful in presenting his argument and most of the time winning the argument. So he discussed this issue and brings a number of dalail and tries to prove that fasting is not just giving up food and drink, it is giving up all acts of disobedience. And he says that fast gets invalidated and you have to make qaza if you perform any act of disobedience, not just only lying and backbiting also. قال al-Ghazali, another famous scholar al-Ghazali, scholar of the 5th century, passed away 456. He says, while commenting on those ahadith, رُبَّ سَائِمٍ حَذُّهُ مِنْ سِيَامِ الْجُوعِ وَالْعَطَشِ, many fasting people won't get from the fasting except for hunger and thirst. He said, هو الذي يفطر على حرام أو من يفطر على لحوم الناس بالغيبة أو من لا يحفظ الجوارح عن الآثام. He says it is those people who are not protecting their limbs while they are fasting, or are performing acts of disobedience while they are fasting. So it is them whose fast will get broken, or their fast is broken, and they won't get any reward for the fasting. قال ابن العربي مقتضى هذا الحديث أن من فعل ما ذكر لا يثاب على صيامه. And commenting on those ahadith, Ibn al-Arabi, the famous scholar, Maliki scholar of the 6th and 5th century, passed away 543. He says مقتضى هذا الحديث, meaning he says the muqtada hadha al-hadith, meaning the meaning of those ahadith is anyone, anna man fa'ala ma dhukira, anyone who performed those acts. Which acts? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned: lying, acting upon jahl, screaming, and performing immoral act, backbiting. Those actions mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. So he said anyone who performs those acts or involved in any of those acts, la yuthabu ala siyami. He says he won't get reward for his fasting. لا يثاب ولا صيامه, he won't get any reward for his fasting. معناه أن ثواب الصوم لا يقوم في الموازنة بإثم الزور وما ذكر معه, meaning he won't get any reward for his fasting. قال ابن الجوزي, another great scholar, Allama ibn al-Jawzi, passed away 597. In this scholar of the 6th century. He says لا بد للصائم من ملازمة الصمت عن الكلام الفاحش والغيبة فإنه ما صام من ظل يأكل لحوم الناس. Pay attention to what he's saying. He's saying لا بد للصائم, it is obligatory upon a person who is observing fast من ملازمة الصمت, to keep quiet. And that's what we've been told. قل خيرا تغنم. Or in other hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. The one who believes in Allah and believes in the last day, let him say something good. If there is nothing good he has to say, then stay quiet. So this is what is required. So Ibn al-Jawzi said, La budda lis-saim, a fasting person should remain quiet, anil kalam al-fahish wal-ghiba, meaning he should not say any idle or vulgar speech, wal-ghiba, and should refrain from backbiting. فَإِنَّهُ مَا صَامَ مَنْ ظَلَّ يَأْكُلُ لُحُومَ النَّاسِ. The one who is eating the flesh of other people, the flesh of his dead brother, he's not fasting. Masama, he hasn't fasted. The one who he hasn't fasted, who is involved in backbiting. Masama man dhalla yakulu luhum an-nas. Qala Ibn al-Munir, another scholar of the 7th century, passed away 683. Ibn al-Munir, in his famous Hasha, he says, commenting on those hadiths, he says, huwa kinayatun an adam al-qubul, meaning commenting on the hadith in which Prophet ﷺ said, the one who does not give up qawlu zur and acting upon falsehood, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of this person to give up his food and drink. He says that this means that he hasn't fasted. فَالْمُرَادُ رَدُّ الصَّوْمِ, meaning his fast will be rejected. الْمُتَلَبِّسْ بِالزُّورِ وَقُبُورِ السَّالِمِ مِنْهُ, meaning the fast of the person is accepted who stays away from the qawl zur and acts of disobedience. The one who is mutalabbis, meaning the person who is fasting, but at the same time he's lying or involved in acts of disobedience, his fast is rejected. قال البيضاوي, another scholar, the famous Mufassir. Tafsir Baydawi is very famous tafsir book, passed away in 685. He said, لَيْسَ الْمَقْصُودُ مِنْ شَرِيَّةِ الصَّوْمِ نَفْسُ الْجُوعِ وَالْعَطَشِ. He said, look, why fasting has been legislated, or why fasting has been made obligatory, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want us to stay hungry and thirst. It is a training. What is the purpose behind is to gain the taqwa, meaning you develop the habit of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and refraining from the things that He has prohibited. That is the taqwa. Taqwa means creating a shield between yourself and the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by fulfilling the commands of Allah and staying away from the things that He has prohibited. So he says the fasting, the whole purpose of fasting, or the meaning of fasting, is to create taqwa in the person. Otherwise, the nafsul ju wal atash, meaning the keeping oneself hungry and thirsty, that's not what intended through our fast. بل ما يتبعه من كسر الشهوات وتطويع النفس الأمارة للنفس المطمئنة فإذا لم يحصل ذلك لا ينظر الله إليه نظر المقبول. He's saying the real purpose behind the fasting is to train a person to take control over his nafs ammara, meaning the drive to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the drive that a person has himself to fulfill his lust and desire. So that is the real purpose of fasting. So if a person is not achieving that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to accept his fast. And the famous saying of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Tame, rahimahullah, passed away 728, what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Tame said, he said, وَتَحْقِيقُ الْأَمْرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى أَمَرَ بِالصِّيَامِ لِأَجْلِ التَّقْوَى. Something similar he's also saying. He's saying the objective of fasting is to achieve taqwa. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He Himself said, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Why fasting has been made obligatory? So you can develop the spirit of taqwa. Again, taqwa means the habit of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are ready to give up your food and drink, which is very important for a human being. Our life is dependent upon eating and drinking, but temporarily for a few hours you give up. You give up fulfilling your lust and desire through legal way, meaning you are staying away from your spouse. So if you are doing that for 1 month, it will create or it will develop the spirit or the habit of taqwa and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning eventually you will be able to give up anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to give up, and you will do anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask you to get it done. So again, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah also says that the maqsad of taqwa, the objective of taqwa, of fasting is taqwa. As the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ, he mentioned the hadith. So then he goes on to say, فَإِنْ لَمْ تَحْسُلْ لَهُ التَّقْوَى لَمْ يَحْسُلْ لَهُ مَقْصُودُ الصَّوْمِ. So if you are not developing taqwa through your fasting, you have lost the objective of the fasting. You haven't achieved anything. The main goal and purpose of fast is lost. And then he said, وَلَا أَعْمَالُ الصَّالِحَةِ لَهَا مَقْصُودَانِ. He said the righteous deed that we perform, there are two objectives. Why we perform any act of worship, why we perform any acts of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we want to get two things. He said, وَلَا أَعْمَالُ الصَّالِحَةِ لَهَا مَقْصُودَانِ. Our objective through the righteous deed is two things. حُصُولُ الثَّوَابِ وَانْدِفَاعُ الْعِقَابِ. Why we perform any righteous act, why we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to get reward, and وَانْدِفَاعُ الْعِقَابِ, and keep the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala away. We want to protect ourselves against the punishment of Allah, and we want to get to the Jannah. That is the objective. And by the way, this is not against the ikhlas. Some people, like I always mention, the Sufi type of scholar, and the famous lady Barira, the famous lady known for her ibadah, she used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, perform righteous deed. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about the lady. Allah knows best about her. But obviously, we hold responsible to anyone who makes any statement that goes against the Quran and Sunnah. She used to worship, and on one side of Masala water, and other side the lamp. And her students asked, look, you make sure every time when you're worshipping, one side is fire, other side is water, and you're worshipping. And meaning between this fire and water, you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and perform the long tahajjud prayer. What is the wisdom behind? Why you keep this water and fire at each side of Musalla? And look what she said. She said, if I were to able to destroy the fire using this water, I would do so. If I were able to extinguish the fire of the hell by this water, I will go ahead and do so. And if I were able to burn the Jannah through this fire, I will destroy the Jannah as well. So there's no Jannah and there's no hellfire. Obviously, this is wishful thinking. This is a wishful thinking. Al-Jannatu haqqun wa naru haqqun. And fariqun fil Jannah wa fariqun fil sayr. They asked, why you want to do so? She said, if there's no Jannah and there's no hellfire, a worshipper will worship just to attain or achieve the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not business, not for the Jannah, and not running away from the hellfire. Okay, as I said, this is a wishful thinking and against the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned ihtisab, especially in the fasting. Man sama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaban. Man qama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaban. And man qama laylat al-qadr imanan wa ihtisaban. Meaning the one who fasted out of iman and hoping for the reward, hoping for the Jannah, then his previous sins will be forgiven. So worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the intention of ihtisab is part of the ikhlas. It is from the essence of the ikhlas. It's not against the ikhlas. So let's come back to the saying of Shaykh Muhammad Farrukh. Al-amal as-salih lahu maqsudan. He says the righteous deed that we perform, we are looking to achieve two things through them. Al-husulu thawab. Husulu thawab meaning the reward we are looking for, when the foul iqab, when we want to run away and protect ourselves against the punishment of Allah. فَإِذَا فَعَلَهَا مَا الْمَنْهِيَّاتِ. If you are acting upon, meaning if you are acting upon the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you are doing ibadah, but at the same time, mal manhiyat, at the same time, you are involved in the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. You are fasting, but during the fast you are backbiting. During the fast you are watching TV. Meaning while you are watching TV, what I mean is you are watching something improper. So what happens? Fatahu thawab. Then he will lose the reward. The person will lose the reward. Qala Ibn al-Qayyim. His students, Ibn al-Qayyim, Allama Ibn al-Qayyim, commenting on those hadiths, he says that, look, هذه تفسد صومه وهذه تهبط أجره. Meaning if you are eating and drinking and not staying away from your spouse during the fast, it will invalidate your fast, obviously. وهذه تهبط أجره. And if you're not refraining from other acts of disobedience, being lying and backbiting, he talks about them. He says, yuhbitu ajruhu, this will destroy your ajr. You won't get any ajr for your fasting. And before concluding, a few more things here. Qala Ibn Rajab, another scholar, Ibn Rajab, al-Hanbali, passed away 795. I mean this scholar of the 8th century. He says, إن التقرب إلى الله تعالى بترك المباحات لا يكمل إلا بعد التقرب إليه بترك المحرمات. Pay attention what he's saying. He's saying, إن التقرب إلى الله تعالى. You cannot get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while you are giving up halal things. That's what we do during fasting. I mean, generally speaking, eating, drinking, and having physical relationship with your spouse is halal. You are giving up halal things while you are fasting. So he's saying you cannot get reward and cannot get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during your fast while you're giving up the mubahat and you're not giving up the things that are already haram. لا يكمل إلا بعد التقرب إليه بترك المحرمات. Meaning your act of worship or your fasting is not completed or not complete until you give up the muharramat. Things are already haram. Again, he's saying, look, you are giving up halal things while you are fasting. Eating and drinking, halal, our life is dependent upon eating and drinking, we cannot survive. Having physical relationship with your spouse, you're married in a halal way, is also halal. So how come you're giving up halal things and you're not giving up haram, things that are already haram, or they are haram in the very first place? He says your fast cannot be completed until you refrain from haram things. And then he said, فَمَنْ ارْتَكَبَ الْمُحَرَّمَاتِ. The one who is committing the haram things while he's fasting, كَانَ بِمَثَابَةٍ مَنْ يَتْرُكُ الْفَرَائِضِ وَيَتَقَرَّبُ بِالنَّوَافِلِ. Pay attention, a very interesting statement. He said, he is like the one who is yatrukul fara'id. He is refraining from obligatory things and he is involved in the Meaning he's like the one who is not performing the obligatory and very active in nawafil. وَيَتَقَرَّبُ بِالنَّوَافِلِ. He wants to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the voluntary acts while he's not fulfilling the obligatory one. Obviously, the way to achieve the wilayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this. First you fulfill the obligatory deeds. First you do the obligatory deeds for eyes. And then, as Prophet ﷺ said, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا يَزَالُ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ. Meaning first you are performing the obligatory ones, and then you are performing the voluntary deeds on regular basis, and you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you become wali of Allah. Okay, here we find many people, Nauzubillah, other way around. They are active in nawafil, and while they ignore the faraiz. And I give the example of, I say not to say anything bad about these tablighi people, but you find that they are involved in the nawafil while they stay away or ignore the faraiz. More important things. Okay, so that's what Ibn Rajab says, that you are giving up mubahat while you are fasting, and if you are not refraining from the haram, it is like you are refraining from the faraiz and you are involved in the nawafil, and which is not the proper way. The proper way is first take care of the faraiz and then go performing the nawafil. And then he tries to elaborate the issue. Let's move ahead. قال ابن حجر الغيبة تضر بالصوم. Hafiz Ibn Hajar, I think 852, passed away. He says الغيبة تضر بالصائم, meaning backbiting damages the fasting. Either you can say that it destroys, invalidates altogether, or the person will lose the reward. قال المناوي, another great scholar, Allama Munawi, passed away 1031 Hijrah. He said, أما الفرض فيسقط والذمة تبرأ بأمر الجوارح فلا يعاقب عقاب ترك العبادة بل يعاتب أشد عتاب حيث لم يرغب فيما عند ربه من الثواب. Meaning what he's trying to say is that if a person not refraining from acts of disobedience, he will lose the reward. He will lose the reward of fasting. And obviously losing the reward of fasting is no good. The reason that we are fasting is to achieve the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us through those actions from His punishment. And the reward is lost if a person is not staying away from the sins. Okay, so while we talked about the ahadith and the saying of the Sahaba and Tabi'in and our scholars and Salaf in this regard, so what we need to do is to take control of your tongue and not to say anything that displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by the way, as I mentioned, tongue is very important. Sometimes you say just few words and you don't pay attention, and they will be so displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if He wants, He can punish and throw him into the hellfire. And the famous hadith comes to my mind, Aisha radiallahu anha, she described Hafsa. She described Hafsa saying that she is short. And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I think it is one of the, either in the both Sahihain or definitely it is in one of them. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you have said something, if it were to mix with the ocean, it will spoil the whole water of the ocean. All she said is, she is short. Kafa min hasbuka min safiya kada wa kada. So very important to take control of your tongue. Other thing we need to be mindful is to take control of other limbs as well. Don't look to something that is haram. غض البصر وكف عن الالتفات النظر إلى كل ما يذم ويكره وإلى كل ما يشغل القلب ويلهي عن ذكر الله. Okay, what scholars are saying, not only from the haram, he's saying كل ما يشغل القلب ويلهي عن ذكر الله. Anything that diverts you from the purpose of the fasting, diverts you from the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, watching too much of news, sports, even there, let's say there's nothing haram, but still it is waste of time, so that also should be avoided while you're fasting. إِلَى كُلِّ مَا يُشْغِلُ الْقَلْبِ. Not only protect your eyes or your gaze from the haram, stay away from the mubah as well. Not too much of watching the normal things that will take your time and divert you from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم. In this regard, let me mention some things. Scholars have said that, look, if you are looking to something that is haram, obviously it is haram at all time, but more so when you are fasting. You will see the consequences even after a while. Nothing goes unnoticed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If He not forgives, you will be punished and you will see the evil consequences of your evil actions in this world, sooner or later, or hereafter. انظر يا أخي إلى أخبار من مضى قال أبو الأديان كنت مع أستاذي أبي بكر الدقاق فمر حدث فنظرت إليه. So Abu Ladian, one of the scholars, he said, I was with my teacher, and marra hadathun fanazartu ilayh. Someone young passed, and I looked at him. Someone young person passed, and I looked at him. Fara'ani ustad wa anzur ilayh, meaning looking with, not as ordinary looking with sort of lust and so on and so forth. And my teacher noticed that I'm looking at the young lady also. قال يا بني لتجدن غبها ولو بعد. And the teacher Abu Bakr al-Daqqaq said, look, you are going to see the consequences, evil consequences of this action, ولو بعد غبة, even after a while. Sometimes you don't see the result straight away. You see the result after a while. And look what happened. He said, فَبَقِيتُ 20 سَنَةً. He said, I was fearful for 20 years. I was fearful for 20 years. And I would remember what my teacher said, that you will see the evil result of this action even after a while. So he said, I was fearful for 20 years, and I was thinking what's bad is going to happen. Then look what happened one day. فَنِمْتُ لَيْلَةً. One day I slept, وَأَنَا مُتَفَكِّرٌ فِيهِ, and I was thinking about the meaning, about the warning issued by my teacher. And look what happened. فَأَصْبَحْتُ وَقَدْ نَسِيتُ الْقُرْآنَ كُلَّهُ. Meaning in the morning I woke up and the Quran disappeared from my head. Meaning the Quran I used to have in my head, the Quran that I had memorized, the memorization of the Quran disappeared from my head. So that is another important thing we need to be mindful during fasting. كَفُّ السَّمْعِ عَنِ الْإِصْغَاءِ. Don't listen to something haram. Meaning if speaking something haram is haram, and it becomes more haram while you are fasting, so what about listening to the haram? They both are same. كُلُّ مَا هُرِمَ قَوْلُهُ هُرِّمَ الْإِصْغَاءُ إِلَيْهِ. Anything that is haram to be said or to be uttered, so listening is also haram. Sometimes what happens, you're not saying anything, but someone is saying something wrong. Don't entertain them. Don't pay attention. You find if your friends and relatives also speak ill about or backbite also, don't entertain. Don't listen to something haram. For example, music is haram all the time, and it becomes even more so while you are fasting. Songs and many other things one should refrain from. And the last thing is kaffu baqiyatil jawarin al-atham. So it is not only the tongue that you restrain, your eyes that you restrain, or your ears that you restrain, the whole body and other limbs. Kaffu baqiyatil jawarin al-atham. Mean don't try to cause harm using your hand to other person, or your legs kicking, or going somewhere a bad place. So protect all your limbs from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from causing harm to other Muslims. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-Muslimu man salim al-Muslimuna min biyadihi wa lisanihi, aw kama qala an-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The true Muslim is the who, meaning from his tongue and from his limbs and from his hands, other Muslims are safe. Nowadays, for example, you send a message, or you say, meaning hurting someone or saying something bad. So you're not speaking, but you are using your fingers. So all these things should be avoided, and a person should refrain from them. Again, not only in the month of Ramadan and during fasting, these things are haram at all time. These things are haram at all time, and they remain haram, but we have to be more careful in the blessed month of Ramadan, and we have to avoid them while we are fasting. So these are the few things I wanted to share with you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to fast in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make from those people who are achieving taqwa through their fasting. And may Allah make all of us from those people who fast during the month of Ramadan and observe Qiyamul Layl and get the freedom from the hellfire and get the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم سائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا رب.